everybody. My name is Angie Bishianan. I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects pre-law students to attorneys so that they can learn more about the legal profession before they decide whether or not they want to spend 3 more years of school and hundreds of thousands of dollars on law school. And so we started doing these Zoom meetups at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic to allow pre-law students, current law students, lawyers, paralegals, anybody in the legal community to connect with other people and learn about topics that might help them in their legal careers and about different career paths. So I'm excited to introduce to you today Mr. Stan Ball. He is the Vice President and General Counsel at Eaton Corporation, and he uses his position at Eaton to advocate for second chance hiring. So he's going to talk to you a little bit today about his career path and his efforts to advance social justice through second chance hiring. So Stan, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Angie, and thank you everyone for allowing me to.
Oh.
I am.
Oh no.
Let's see.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was trying to mute the rest of the audience. I'm sorry. 1 second. Let me mute everyone else.
I'm sure there are a lot of people who would love the ability to mute me. So you enjoy that power that you've displayed. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for allowing me to be here to talk to you a little bit about my path and then some of the key initiatives that we're working on at Eaton. Just before we get started, I do not like lecturing and I don't like talking to myself. I would greatly appreciate it if I had the opportunity to answer any questions that you may have, whether it's through the chat or if you just want to unmute yourself to the extent Angie allows you to unmute yourself and chime in through the course of this conversation, which will split up into 3 parts. The first part of the conversation, I'll just give you some background on who I am and my journey so you know who you're speaking with. And then the middle portion of the conversation, I'll talk to you about second chance hiring and what we're doing at Eaton and my role in that process. And then the last part of the conversation, I'll take any question that you may have, especially for those of you who are thinking about a career in law and just kind of have some burning questions. Feel free to ask, and there's not a question I won't answer. And if there is one, I'll just plead the fifth and tell Angie to take over for me. So let me start off by just giving you some very brief background on who I am and how I got in front of you in your screens today. I am an Ohio native, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I went to Baldwin-Wallace University, which is a small private liberal arts school in Northeast Ohio. I studied business. While I was at Baldwin-Wallace University, I worked my way through school at a company called ING Financial, which is now called Voya. They used to have the bench with the tiger on it, and now it's the squirrel. I went from a squirrel to a tiger. I still don't understand that marketing scheme, but that's where they went. While I was in undergrad, I had no aspirations whatsoever to do law school. I don't have any lawyers in my family. It just was not a thing for me besides Law and Order. But my mentor at the time, when I was getting ready to graduate, towards the beginning of my senior year, we were having a conversation about what I was going to do. And my plan was to stay with, at the time, ING Financial and be a financial advisor. And he dared me essentially to go to law school. And so without studying for the LSAT, without knowing what I was getting into, having no real understanding of this industry, this behemoth of an industry, I took the LSAT and I applied to 2 of the law schools in my backyard, Cleveland State and Case Western Reserve. Cleveland State gave me more money and I'm a very cheap man, so I went to Cleveland State. Enjoyed the experience, and in my 1L year, I had the opportunity to summer at a law firm in town called Baker Hostetler. I summered for them both my 1L year and my 2L year, and then they gave me an opportunity to start my legal career with Baker and Hostetler. While I was in law school, I participated in 2 things, which I would encourage all of you who are thinking about law school to do. I did mock trial, which is just a great exercise between mock trial and moot court. Those are just great experiences. So I'd encourage you to think about those as you consider your law school career. And then the other thing I did was I wrote a note for our school's law review. And so those two experiences, one being on your feet and dealing with the uncertainty that comes with a judge or other lawyers in the moot court or mock trial space. And on the other side, really kind of embracing your full academic potential by writing a note and doing the citations and the research, et cetera, were great experiences. I will say to you on the note front, I don't ever want to do a note again. It's incredibly time consuming, but it's good to get it done and get the thing published. And I actually wrote it on medical identity theft, which is still a thing. It's crazy that was over 10 years ago when I wrote that note. In terms of my career, I mentioned that I started in big law with Baker and Hostetler, and because I grew up in Northeast Ohio, went to school all of my formative years in Northeast Ohio, I figured it was a time for me to get out of Northeast Ohio and try something different. So the firm had an office in Chicago, and probably about a year or two after I started, I moved to Chicago, and I practiced there for a number of years, still doing commercial litigation, big companies suing each other, and then representing high net worth individuals when they would be investigated by the SEC or charged with things like insider trading. So that was, the financial space, that was my bread and butter. I left Baker and Hostetler to another big firm called Ackerman in Chicago, where I practiced for 2 years. And while I was there, I focused on two things. One, I worked for banks in trying to deal with when they have large, everyone knows of a foreclosure when it's a single home, but oftentimes when you're a bank, you finance these massive commercial buildings and malls and et cetera. And so banks hire lawyers to protect their interests on those types of properties. And then the other part of what I did, which kind of brought my career full circle, was I represented financial advisors when their clients would sue them. And so oftentimes you could be a financial advisor and you have a client for 10, 15 years. They'd be unhappy with their returns over the years. And so they would sue you or take you to arbitration and claim that you as an advisor, you didn't fulfill your fiduciary responsibilities. So I did that for 2 years and got a random phone call from Eaton Corporation. And because Eaton is not, it's not a consumer facing brand, if you will, it's not, you don't think of like Coke or, Pepsi. I'm going to take a second and just kind of explain what a Eaton is and what we do, because you probably have never heard of us. Eaton is a $50 billion market cap international manufacturer. Our slogan is we're an intelligent power management company, which essentially means that for everything that requires power, we're likely involved. So in your house, if you go and you look at your circuit breaker down in your basement, more likely than not, or in your garage, it's probably going to be between one or two companies. It's either going to be Siemens or it's going to be an Eaton breaker. Our business is operated in two sectors. From the electrical sector, we provide circuit breakers, transformers, switchgear. We help countries establish their electrical grids and enhance their electrical grids. We do a lot of stuff in the electrical sector. Our other side of our business is our industrial sector, which is broken down into three parts. We have a hydraulics business where if you're driving down the freeway and you see all those heavy equipment on the side of the road, they have hydraulic pumps that we make that allow them to move. And you see, when they have the claws that come down, those are our pumps that allow those things to move. So Deere, Caterpillar, they operate because of things that we produce. The second part of our industrial sector business is we operate a vehicle group where we make supercharger engines, we make clutches, we make transformers for both consumer vehicles as well as for commercial vehicles. So 18-wheelers that you see going down the road, 9 out of 10 of them, whether it's a Volvo or Peterbilt, those are our clutches, our transmissions, et cetera. That's what we do. And then as vehicles become more electrified, as the Teslas of the world take over, as the Volvos of the world take over with electric vehicles, we're one of the major companies who are helping with two things. One, making sure that the power from the batteries in those vehicles can actually get to the wheels. So we help with the distribution of power from those powerful batteries. But the second thing that we do is, as you can imagine, with the proliferation of electric vehicles, all these gas stations that you see all around the country and the world for that matter are going to need to be replaced with something. They're going to need to be, reconfigured to, instead of having petroleum and these big tanks worth of gas and that's underneath them, there need to be converted into charging stations. And one of the most unique things that I think is particularly interesting is that right now, to charge an electric vehicle, it takes some time. You probably have to sit with that car for 30 minutes to an hour. But as technology advances, what we are participating in is speeding up the time it takes to charge a vehicle, and then rolling out that technology, not just to the existing footprint of gas stations, but putting those types of charging stations in office buildings, in a parking lot of an In-N-Out Burger or a McDonald's. Being able to manufacture charging stations that can do it quickly and efficiently, and then setting up an infrastructure around the country is a huge thing that we're participating in. The last part of our industrial sector is we're in the aerospace business. And so we make parts for original equipment manufacturers, your Boeings, your Airbuses of the world. We make parts for them. And probably if you don't remember anything that I've said about our company, I'll share this with you. My favorite thing that we make is called a lightning isolator. If you have a fear of flying, mute me right now. Don't listen to what I'm about to say if you're afraid of flying, but airplanes get struck by lightning more times than you would think. On average, a plane gets struck by lightning at least once or twice a year while it is in flight and has people in it. And so what a lightning isolator does is it does two things. It protects the fuel line when inevitably a plane gets struck by lightning. And then also it helps to get the charge from one end of the plane out the other back into the atmosphere and keeps everybody safe and moving. And so that's a product that I'm very, very proud of that we make. So with that overview of Eaton, I have three kind of major responsibilities for the company. Number one, I manage our litigation globally. We operate all across the world. And so it's my responsibility to manage both existing litigation and pre-dispute kind of disagreements, if you will, to try to resolve them before they get into litigation around the world. The second thing that I do is I manage our roster of outside counsel globally. I don't handle all of our cases myself. We have outside counsel that we engage and employ all around the world, not just for litigation, but also when we buy businesses, when we sell businesses, for our IP management of our patents. We have outside lawyers who deal with all that. And then the last thing that I do is employees, even though the stuff that we make is not clothing or shoes, we still have employees who will take things that they shouldn't take and try to sell them on eBay. So I work with our internal audit team as well as our HR function to prosecute individuals and try to get our stuff back when our employees or others steal our goods and try to sell them for their own purposes. That's what I do at work. Outside of work, I love being involved in the community. I'm a big proponent of education. I think education is number one, it's the great equalizer, but it's also a great advancer. And so from an educational perspective, I serve on two boards. One is Guinn Academy, which is it's the only, in Ohio, it is the only all boys school. And because of its geographic location, 90% of the students are African-American males. And what's unique about this school is our graduation rate, it rivals the top schools in the state. We graduate over 90% of our students. All of those who graduate either go on to a four-year institution, the military, or to a trade school. And we've done that for decades. The other school that I had the privilege of serving on the board is for Baldwin-Wallace University, my alma mater. And then outside of the educational space, I serve on the board for the Great Lakes Science Center, which is a very cool, massive, it houses both a school, which is focused on STEM education, but it is also a school. I guess the thing I would equate it to is if you think about, a children's museum where you go and children have the ability to play and learn about science, and you add on top of that kind of a natural history museum together. That's how I would describe the Great Lakes Science Center. And if you are a big football fan, next week you will see the NFL draft is here in Cleveland, and they are utilizing our space at the Great Lakes Science Center to host it. So if you watch any part of the NFL draft next week, you will see the Great Lakes Science Center prominently displayed. Last thing I do outside of work is I serve on the board for the Ahuja Medical Center. It's a pretty large hospital in Northeast Ohio, and we're in the final stages. We already broke ground, but we're in the final stages of putting together our men's health facility. It's a big addition to our hospital. If you know anything about men, we are awful at going to the doctor. We are just, I mean, you couldn't, unless it's already broken and has been broken and Robitussin can't fix it, we are horrible at going to the doctor. But one of the things that we think is critically important and why we built this addition to our hospital is we wanted to create an environment that felt like it wasn't a hospital, to encourage men to come, to explore all facets of health, not just your physical health, but your mental health, your financial health, et cetera. And so I won't go into a long spiel, but what we've done, we've created a hospital. It's probably one of the few hospitals in the world that actually has a full-length football field on the ground floor. And we did that because it's a way to encourage people to come in, not just for physical therapy after they've had a surgery, but for athletes and weekend warriors, for them to come in and explore preventative treatments so that they don't have to have some of the injuries that normally happen, because men, not only do we not go to the doctor, we rarely stretch after we exercise. So that's my spiel. That's my life in a nutshell. Seeing as there are no questions, I'll turn the conversation into the second portion that I wanted to share with you, and that's second chance hiring. And for those of you who maybe are somewhat unfamiliar with the topic, I'm going to do sort of a lengthy kind of overview of what I'm talking about and why I think it's critically important. And I'm going to talk about it from the lens of being an American, because this is a uniquely American issue. And it's something that if we don't fix it, it could be, I don't want to say it could, but it historically has been a detriment to our growth as a country and will continue to be so. I think it'll only get worse, to be frank with you. So I want to ground this conversation not only in just, being Americans and us sharing this country together, but also with a recognition that your employment, what you do every day, what you do with your hands, what you do with your mind is a cornerstone of how you feel about yourself. It matters. We would not be on the phone today if you didn't care about what you're going to do with your life and how you're going to build the various components of your legacy, which naturally has a component of practicing law to it. And so this is a human being, person to person, if we can acknowledge that and we can understand that employment, that sense of worth, that sense of bringing something and adding some value to the world around you is very important, then I think if we approach it from that way, then it'll really help you understand why second chance hiring is so important. A question came in. I'm gonna pause, put a pin in that, and I'm gonna try to answer this question. Let's see how good I am at multitasking. So the question that came in was, can you compare and contrast your experience with big law versus internal at Eaton? And do you think it's possible to be hired as an in-house lawyer without outside experience? So I'll take the second part of that question first, and I'll jump to the beginning part. It is possible to be hired as an in-house lawyer first without working as an outside counsel. The percentage of that is small. It's small for that to happen, and quite frankly, it's rare. And the reason is because being an in-house lawyer means you're dealing with all types of just random, crazy things that happen on a day-to-day basis. And in order for you to have that foundation, that basic foundation of being able to know what you're looking at, it's helpful to have some outside experience. And that outside experience doesn't have to be litigation. I hope for many of you that it's not. I hope that outside experience is, M&A work or doing securities work or employment. but you want to have some training, some subject matter expertise before you go in-house. That would be my recommendation, and I think the numbers of people who get hired for in-house positions, I think that supports my analysis. On to your other question about comparing and contrasting big law versus working at Eaton, I would say two things are important, or are glaring in terms of those differences. Number one, big law, I understand what I'm about to say. You have to have an appreciation for the business of law. When you work at a law firm, they care about what hours you bill. And what hours are you bill, and how does that translate to profits for the law firm? And so because that is their focus, everything that you get judged on as a lawyer at that firm is focused on, okay, all this activity that you're doing, how does that make this firm more money? Okay, so if you are working your cases, billing hours, great, love it. If you are out in the community, okay, that's all right, but how does that relate to you bringing in clients and making more money? The lens in which you are looked at is not necessarily, wow, it's great, appreciate your personal development, great that you have those wonderful soft skills, you're going out there to make a difference. The lens in which you are viewed is, how does all those other things make this law firm money? And to me, I didn't find that fulfilling. It's good training, great experience, but in terms of fulfilling the whole person, for me, I thought it was important to work in an environment where everything that I do will be respected and is acknowledged as a contribution to the overall progression of the organization. And without question, working in-house, and particularly working at Eaton, has checked those boxes. And I'll talk about it in a second when I get back to the second chance hiring piece. The ability to have my organization fully support my engagement with the community and being out there and trying to make a difference, it has a direct link and a connection with the organization itself. Because as a corporation, one of the things that you're responsible for is being a responsible citizen in your community. So I would say that. And then the second thing that I would just say is that you're going to learn, I think you'll learn a heck of a lot more about the world around you working in-house at a corporation than at a law firm. Again, a law firm, you're narrowly focused, you're thinking about your cases or the M&A deal that you're working on, and you're thinking about just that law firm. At a corporation, you're thinking about everything. I mean, everything matters. So to give you an example, when COVID first, almost like over a year ago, when COVID first hit, I didn't just say, okay, well, cool, I get to just work from home. No, it's, okay, COVID has hit. Now, how do I help our 92,000 employees around the world? How do I help them navigate who's coming to work, who can't come to work, who's an essential worker, who's not an essential worker? Oh my God, the United States is not issuing out an order. Each of the 50 states are issuing out an order that I need to interpret and provide advice and counsel to. You're never gonna have that at a law firm, and especially in real time, having to make those types of decisions. Stressful, yes, but let me tell you, you learn a lot. And you just connect with a lot of different people. So I think another one came in. Let me. Okay. Do businesses compare and contrast law firms' pro bono activities when considering which firm to hire or retain? Okay. Why do big firms? Okay, so companies who are hiring outside lawyers, we do consider their pro bono work. We do consider what they're doing in the community. We do that because we want to make sure that the firms that we engage align with our core values and our mission. And I'll give you a more kind of current example of something that we care about that it may not be apparent, is from a diversity perspective, we make hiring and firing decisions based upon the composition of the team that they bring to us. And so if you bring us a team and you propose a team to work on one of our matters that is not diverse, we won't hire you. It's just flat out, we won't hire you. And so it's an extension of, the reason why pro bono is so important is because it demonstrates a value, a commitment to the community. Diversity in our profession is important to us, and so if you don't have it, then you won't get engaged.
Got a hot bench, Stan.
Hot bench, I know. I don't get to. Okay.
Can you share what kinds of fields of law that you see and work in being an in-house counsel? There may be a combination, but just give us a little bit of an overview.
Sure. So I would say that I'd say there's four. There's four kind of main categories of in-house lawyers that you'll see. Number one is litigation, because nobody likes to do no business person likes directly engaging with lawyers. There's something about us. There's something about us where business people say, you know what, I need a buffer. Let me get a litigation, an in-house litigation person to deal with these outside lawyers. So you generally, you'll see, if you have a litigation background, you'll see them as in-house lawyers. The second group of people that you'll see are IP lawyers, and I'm going to use the phrase hard IP, and here's what that means. IP is bifurcated into patents and then everything else. And so the soft IP is that everything else. Those are the trademarks, the trade secrets, the copyrights. And the reason they call it soft is because you don't really need to have an engineering degree, some formal hard training to understand and protect a copyright, a trademark, or you're fine. Like that can be done. The hard IP.
I always tell them that IP practitioners that are working soft IP, we take issue with the soft IP.
I didn't mean, I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. I don't make the rules.
No, it's all good. I get it. We're the soft, fluffy stuff. That's fine.
Yeah, but the hard IP side of the house is the patents, and that's you'll see a lot of patent lawyers go in house, and the reason being is, one, that's a very special. You have a background in something, whether it's electrical engineering, whether it's hydraulic. You have a very specific level of expertise, and that's helpful for two fronts. One, you can communicate directly. If you're a manufacturer, you can communicate directly with the engineers that are in-house and work with them on prosecuting a patent. And then number two, you can parlay that understanding of how patents work into providing advice and counsel to your business about what patents you should protect and what patents you should just let go. Like they're just not worth the expenditure. It's called portfolio management for patents. The third category you'll see are M&A lawyers, which is kind of self-explanatory. If you have a business that is likes to buy other businesses, like Eaton, we buy businesses all the time. We sell them all the time. It's good to have a lawyer who's got M&A experience. And then the last category of lawyers that you'll typically see in-house are lawyers who have a securities background. And I know many of you may not have an understanding what I'm saying, because you're getting ready to start your law school journey. But one of the classes I encourage all of you to take in law school is about, they'll call it differently. Some will call it corporations, some will call it business organizations, some will call it securities law. Essentially, what all those courses, what they do is they explain how the different types of how businesses are set up and all the various rules. They'll break down the difference between an S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC, a publicly traded corporation, and all the rules. There's a laundry list of rules of how those organizations have to operate. And so if you follow me, you understand why it's so important to have an expert in the security space in your company, especially if you're a publicly traded company, because it's very easy to mess up something, to sell a stock during a period where you shouldn't, to buy a stock when you shouldn't. It's really helpful. So those are the four main ones that you'll see in-house.
I think that's all the questions.
One just popped up, I'm reading.
I think we just had I think the only other question was back to second chance hiring. So if you want to jump back here, we can do that. Yeah,
I like Brandy's comment. It is exciting. Brandy is very exciting. So I'd encourage you to think about in-house life. So let me see if I can pivot back to the second chance hiring just for a moment here. And I started the conversation with identifying, one, it's a uniquely American issue, and then two, where you work, it provides a sense of pride. It's a catalyst to get going in other areas. And it's a part of how we've been trained and raised as a society, especially as a capitalistic society, that where you work is important. It just is. It's important. And so what's the problem here that we're trying to address? The problem here is that individuals in America, particularly individuals who have already served whatever sentence they got, whether it was from probation all the way to, if they had a felony sentence, years of prison, that they've already served. They've already paid their debt to society. But for whatever reason, America and the way that we've set up our system, that they carry that tag of being a felon or of having a criminal history, they carry that tag for the rest of their life, which in essence means that even though the judge, when the gavel hit the table, said, your sentence is X years, you effectively have a lifetime sentence, because the data has shown us that when an individual who has a criminal history fills out an employment application and they check the box that they have a criminal history, that their chance of getting a second interview or getting an interview period decreases by 50%. And so that's demonstrating to us very clearly that our system is not set up for individuals to get a fair second chance, to have the right to say, I've changed, I'm a new person, or I made a mistake, like we all do, and I'm just trying to get back into the game. And so that's the general premise of the second chance hiring and why it's so important. But let me dive deeper and just throw some stats at you to make sure that we're all aligned on what's really happening here. So in America, the average unemployment rate for an individual with a criminal history is 27%, which is substantially higher than what the unemployment rate is for individuals without a criminal history. And this may not seem like a big deal until you realize how many people in America have a criminal history. Let me throw some numbers at you. 70 million, it's probably more than 70 million of Americans have an arrest or a conviction that would show up on a criminal background check. That's a third of the adult population in America. But yet and still, we still have this kind of disconnect between logic and truth, where we look down our nose at people that have a criminal history. And I'm sure if you dug deep enough in your individual Rolodex, you could think of a couple of people that you interact with, or decent human beings that have a criminal history. It happens. In addition to that kind of staggering number, there are 1.5 million Americans in state and federal prison, and then over 70,000 Americans who are in local jails. 60,000 Americans get released annually. And of that number, of that 60,000, after a year, 60% of that 60,000 will not have a job after their first year of being released. And we know that your ability to get gainful employment has a direct line to the recidivism rate. And so getting employed is a big deal. This issue of being unemployed following a conviction is significantly worse in the Black and brown community, just to give you a sense of how bad it is. Under normal circumstances, for an individual who does not have a criminal history in normal economic circumstances, for a white male, the unemployment rate hovers around 4%. For a Black male who does not have a criminal history under normal economic circumstances, the unemployment rate is around 7.5%. For white males who are formerly incarcerated under normal economic circumstances, the unemployment rate is 18%. For Black men, it jumps to 35%. And for Black women, particularly, it jumps to somewhere around 44%, have an unemployment rate if they have a criminal history. This is massive numbers. And effectively, what we've done as a country is that we have sidelined a significant portion of our population who, but for a criminal history, could contribute, could add value. There's nothing that says that they're unintelligent or they can't. There's no data that says that. And in fact, studies have shown that when organizations do hire individuals with a criminal history, those individuals outperform their peers. They stay longer in positions and they're more engaged in their work. And in fact, the managers who they report to prefer them over individuals without a criminal history, but yet and still, we still have this issue. So why is it important to address? You know, I'm not someone who just says, hey, it's the right thing to do and move on. I think that's not persuasive to a lot of audiences. But what I do think is important, because we're talking about the economy, we're talking about our country, is that even before the pandemic struck, in America, we were having a very, very difficult time filling open roles in STEM, nursing, manufacturing, and education. There are jobs. Don't let anybody fool you that there are not jobs out there that are wide open. The problem is that we have not trained our people enough to the point where they can fill open roles. And one of the ways that we could readily fill these open roles is to engage this pool of untapped talent. And our refusal to meaningfully engage this group of people has cost the American economy, some estimate on the low end about $57 billion a year. And they claim that the GDP is reduced somewhere around $78 billion because of poor prospects in the labor market. So we're hurting ourselves here. We're really hurting ourselves by not engaging this group of people. From a personal perspective, the reason why I care, aside from the numbers, aside from the metrics, the reason why I care about this issue is because I'm just honest. And I had an experience several years ago. I went to, it was a juvenile detention center in Chicago, and I was there just for a volunteer effort. And I had the opportunity to kind of sit in a room where there were, let's say, about 20 juvenile offenders who were there at this detention center for an extended period of time. And I had the opportunity to just talk to them and just learn more about their experiences. And the more and more I sat there, the more and more I realized I'm looking at myself. I'm looking at myself. The only difference is that just by virtue of happenstance, I didn't get in a situation where I could have been convicted of a crime. But the reality is as stupid as I was in growing up as a kid, as stupid as I was in undergrad and law school, and probably to this day, it's only a mistake. It's one mistake can dramatically alter your life. And you have to have an appreciation for how blessed you are that, yeah, I've gotten to where I've gotten, but let's not act as though I'm some great human being. It's just that simple. With the way that our criminal justice system is set up, it's just that easy for your life to totally change. So let me shift and talk about what we're doing at Eaton. And I'm going to preview something that's going to get launched next Monday. And I hope that you'll keep an eye out for it when it gets launched next Monday. So let's talk about what do we do as lawyers, as potential lawyers, for those who may side, I don't want to do law, but I'll still get in business later. What can we do to help this issue? One of the first things that I encourage companies to do, and it's something that we do, is it's called ban the box. And essentially what that means is that when you have someone fill out an application, you do not ask them on the application whether or not they have a criminal history. And what you do is you allow that person to go through the hiring process, to complete their interviews, so that the potential hiring manager and the other folks who participate in the interview process can actually see who this person is. They can actually get to know the person. They can hear and learn about their grit. They can learn about their intellectual curiosity, all of those things. And then at the time where you have made a hiring decision and you want to extend a conditional offer, you extend the offer and you say, hey, giving you this offer, someone, not me, someone from my organization is going to run a standard background check. The background check is going to be for a limited period of time, probably go back between 5 to 7 years. And they will look at it, they will assess it, and they'll come back to me and let me know whether or not you passed or failed the background check. Now, what's happening on this kind of side project? Well, what the side project is doing, and the reason why you remove the hiring manager from the background check aspect of this is so that someone outside of the hiring process can assess whether or not the crime that this individual has in their background history, whether or not it even relates to the job that they'd be performing. Because most of the time, So give me a great example. If I have a criminal conviction on my history for drug possession, and I'm trying to get hired to do IT work, there's not a connection. There's not a connection. Now, if I ran a Ponzi scheme and I'm trying to get a job at JP Morgan Chase, now we have a connection. I shouldn't get hired. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you need to have corporations, and we do this, you have a side group that looks at the criminal history for a limited window to see whether or not there was a connection between the job they're looking for and the crime that they were convicted of. Even if there is a what we would say a meaningful connection, you don't just dismiss the person from the hiring process. You go back, again, not the hiring manager, but this side group goes back to the person, asks them about it, tries to gauge their level of honesty, talks to them about what they've done to rehabilitate themselves. And the whole point here is you're trying to get a true assessment of who an individual is today, not who they were on their worst day. I'm going to repeat that again, because I think it's something that's really important, is assessing people on where they are today, not on their worst day, because that is counter to the morals and principles that we claim are a part of our criminal justice system. You can't be judged on your worst, or you shouldn't be judged on your worst day. So that's one thing on the ban the box piece. The second thing that Eaton, that we are extremely focused on, and I'm not going to take my CEO's thunder. I've been working with him for over a year on this, and so I'm going to let him do his thing on Monday. And I encourage you to pay attention on. I think the story's going to get covered exclusively by the Wall Street Journal, and we'll have a media campaign. I think it's a very big deal, and I would classify it as the most significant thing that I've done professionally and personally. But one of the things that we're going to do, and we've got others who are going to join us in this effort, is that if you kind of look and peruse this issue, you will notice that a number of companies, big companies, have signed these pledges where they say, we're open, we'll consider hiring individuals with a criminal history. There was a big push in 2016. There was a White House pledge that was associated with it. SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, they followed up with another kind of pledge where corporations signed on and said, yeah, we're open to this. But you'll notice that after the initial pledge, nothing really happened. There was a big splash and nothing happened. And so what needs to happen in America is that we cannot rely on our politicians to get this done. We just can't. I'm sorry. We can't rely on our politicians to shift the mindset, to articulate the fact that we need to engage this untapped pool of talent. It's on the corporation. This is where we are as a country. As a country, I'm sorry. That's where we are. Is that when corporations band together and say, "This is the value signal. This is what we're going to do," you'll notice that things change rapidly. And so, as a corporate citizen, one of the things that we want to signal to the market is that we're going to attack the stigma associated with hiring individuals with a criminal history head on and put our full weight behind it. And so in practice, what does that mean? That doesn't mean that we just stop and say, okay, yeah, we're open to individuals who have a criminal history coming to work for us. That means we are going out and actively recruiting individuals with a criminal history, partner with community organizations to skill up individuals. As I talked about earlier, there's a deficiency, it's not a job shortage, there's a deficiency of individuals who have the skills to take on STEM jobs, nursing jobs, manufacturing, et cetera. So to work directly with nonprofit organizations to skill up individuals to fill those open roles. That type of virtue signaling has been done with smaller organizations in isolated geographic areas, but to have national and international companies who are some of America's largest employers band together and to say that we have to address this issue is unheard of. It's unheard of. And so I'm very excited for what we're about to do. I wish we were having this conversation a week from now because I could go into depth, but I'll leave it at that. So I promised you I was going to
stand so that you can talk about it more.
So I'll leave it at that. Angie, I want to turn it back to you if you want to facilitate, questions with our last kind of 10 minutes that we have. If there are questions or things you want to facilitate from the audience.
Yeah. You guys feel free to ask your questions. Feel free to jump on camera and ask if you'd like, or drop them in the chat box. I'm happy to read them off. In the meantime, I have a question for you, Stan.
Sure.
So, so you basically went to law school on a dare. After looking back at it all, do you think you made the right decision? Would you have ever chosen differently?
I do. Now, would I have chosen differently? Absolutely. I'd love to just, sell pina coladas on a tropical island, but here we are. I'm stuck in Cleveland and it's about to start snowing. But yeah, I do not regret it. And the reason why I don't regret it is because, efforts like what we just talked about for second chance hiring and then increasing diversity, not just in the practice of law, but just in corporate America in general. If you think about the policies and practices that have prohibited progression from a diversity perspective, from a criminal justice reform perspective, they all stop and they all start with lawyers. All of them. Anytime a company wants to do something, who do they call? A lawyer. Anytime a country wants to do something, who do they call? A lawyer. And so in order for us to see change, we have to have our population of people who are out there being, traditional activists, whether it's in person or virtual, but to work right alongside them, you need some lawyers in the room to say, this is how you need to get this stuff done. This is how you make change. So I think it's important. I don't regret it at all.
And it seems like you're involved in so many different things. So how do you make time to balance it all in your life?
It just falls. It just falls into place. I don't know. I think I think one of the things that is important, and I'll just share this with the group here. I think one of the things that we all forget sometimes, and my father, this story resonates with me so much more as I've gotten older. When I was a kid, I forget what it was, but there was something that I wanted him to do, or I wanted some adults to do. And I was very frustrated and angry about it. And my father, he starts laughing and he leans over to me. He says, son, you don't realize we're all just kind of making this stuff up as we go. And that resonates with me as I've become an adult and gotten into some of these spaces. And the reality is we're all kind of making this stuff up. It's all trial and error. Nobody's got it figured out. And so what I would encourage this group to think about is things that I always think about is, learn yourself first. Learn yourself first. Learn what are those signs where you're saying, I think I'm about to burn out, or I think this relationship, whether it's personal, intimate, business, I think this relationship is not helping me the way that it should, and learn those signs. And then take time, always carve out time for yourself. And whatever your hobby is that brings you some peace, do it. Carve out time and make time for it. That's something I think is just, it's invaluable, because the last thing you want to do is be an incredible lawyer and then burn out 5-10 years into it.
Absolutely. That's good advice for their long-term career. Do you have any advice specifically for the pre-law students that may be about to embark on law school? Do you have any advice particularly about law school and that journey?
Yeah. So two things. I would have a candid conversation with your team, or whoever that is, whether that's a loved one, a close friend, someone who will just be honest with you, and really ask the question to yourself, or have them ask you is, why am I going to law school? Like, why? Because as Angie pointed out, it's not a cheap endeavor, and it takes 3 years. And so I think it's important to ask that question of yourself and really be candid as to why you're going. If you're going because you're monetarily motivated, I can assure you there are other ways that you can make money that are a lot cheaper. I can assure you of.
And a lot faster.
And a lot faster. So I would, if money is the motivator, I would move that one right off. I wouldn't put that there. But what I would say to you, if you have a desire to learn, you want to just be a lifelong learner, do it. If you have a desire to be social, and social has it's a scale. And not everybody is the extrovert that's out there, but it's a connection business. It's a relationship business. And so whatever social means to you, if you want to continue that, you pick the right profession because it requires you to get out there and know people. And then the last thing that I'll say, and I'm not trying to I hope this is what I'm about to say doesn't sound scary, but what I encourage people to think about is, let us not, as emerging lawyers, let us not be people who we wait until we're 70, 80 years old to define what our individual legacy is. And what you will find is that lawyers have a disproportionate number of jerks. I'll use the word jerks because I don't know everybody here, so I'll use the word jerks as another word I'd use. And they treat people like garbage up until the tail end of their career, and then all of a sudden they're trying to cobble together a legacy and people that they helped along the way. What I encourage people to think about is, whether you're going to law or you're going to flip burgers, is build your legacy in real time. Be thinking about, how do I want people to remember me? How do I want to help people along the way, and do it in real time? Help people along the way. You'll have a much more enjoyable career when you're giving out more than you're trying to pull in.
I would totally second that, especially because no one is promised tomorrow. If you think, oh, I'm going to wait until I'm, almost about to retire to be nice to people as a lawyer, well, what happens if, you get hit by a bus tomorrow?
Right.
Your people are going to remember you as a jerk then? You really want to make sure that you do think about that. And, as a young lawyer, when I was developing my career, I often felt like I might need to wait until I had more time in order to serve people, in order to do good in the world. When I was a young associate working in, traditional medium-sized law firm and serving corporate clients, I felt like I was so far removed from the people that I was helping. And it was really hard for me to try to find ways to get to serving people. And yeah, I tried to do some pro bono work, participate in my firm's pro bono activities, but I just felt like that wasn't enough. There was more that I wanted to do, more people that I wanted to serve, others that I wanted to help. And I had to constantly think about, okay, there's this dissonance in the way that I feel about the work that I'm doing, at work, and the people I want to serve, and how do I bring those closer together? And so I encourage you to think about those things throughout your career. Even as a first, second, third year lawyer, don't just put your head down and just do the work. I mean, question, do I like being here? Do I feel like it comports with my values and beliefs? Do I feel like I'm still able to serve the people I originally went to law school to serve in the first place? Because yeah, I see a lot of students who go to law school saying, I want to help individuals. I want to do family law, or I want to do, criminal justice, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they get into law school and they get caught up in prestige, and they get caught up in all of these things that law school throws at you. You've got to do law review and moot court. You have to be top 10% of the class. You got to go clerk for a federal judge. And the next thing you know, they come out and they're a corporate lawyer, and they're like, wait a sec, that's not what I came here for. And, and that it's okay for your interests to change, but really always constantly question, is this exactly what I want to leave behind? Is this really what I want to do with my life? Because at the end of the day, you can't separate your work from your life. It's part of it. So, really think about building that legacy as you go along, as Stan says. Patience had a question. Is there a partnership between the juvenile justice centers and schools, like the one where you sit on the board?
Yeah, I saw the second. I want to take the second because I know we're on time. Can I take a minute and answer the second part of her question? Because I love that question. So the second part of her question is, I'm going to paraphrase, is where should these types of second chance programs be housed in a corporation to ensure that it's not just a PR stunt and fizzles out? I love that question. Great one. So what I would say is that these types of programs, two things need to happen. One, the CEO of the organization needs to set the tone at the top. The CEO has to declare, this is what we're doing internally first, and then externally. The second thing that needs to happen is that these programs must sit in the human resources department, because what you have to do is, and it addresses, there's another question up there about changing mindsets. What you have to do as an HR function is you have to assess your corporate culture at a high level, and then at an individual level, you have to assess your managers of people to see who actually has the skills to make sure that when I hire someone with a criminal history, that this manager, I'm not going to put them with a supervisor who's looking down their nose at them or who doesn't understand the needs that may be very different for someone with a criminal history or someone who's fresh out of prison for someone who is not. And so having your HR function, you'll assess your policies, change them, make sure you have this second group of people who's doing the background checks, looking at the individual supervisors and managers to make sure that they are equipped and they have the knowledge necessary to provide the wraparound support for individuals with a criminal history. And then the last thing I would say is to make a commitment as an organization. Again, CEO first, internally, top down, that we're not just hiring individuals with a criminal history for entry-level jobs and for them to stay there. That's not what we're doing. We are making a commitment as an organization for them to come into our organization, to stay in our organization, and advance in our organization. So it's a minute. I only had a minute to answer that, but I love that question. So.
Thank you so much, Dan. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing all of your words of wisdom with the students and your career path with them. If they have follow-up questions, would you mind if they connected with you on
Yeah, come on.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and drop Stan's LinkedIn in
I dropped it earlier, so it's in the chat up there, probably at the top somewhere.
Okay, perfect. If you guys don't know how to save the chat file, there's an ellipses button above the chat window that you can save the entire chat. So yeah, if you guys have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And tomorrow we will be doing a virtual happy hour. So come back tomorrow, or I'm sorry, not tomorrow, Thursday, we will have another Zoom meetup. And then Friday, we will have a Zoom happy hour. So come back for our events later this week. And I hope to see you all very soon. Thanks so much, Dan.
Yep, anytime. Take care, everybody.